I'm Niela Miller in the physical world and Marly Milena here in Second Life, and that's how most people know me, as Marly. As Marly Milena, I came to Second Life in 2007, so it's about 5 years ago. I founded my group, the Octagon for Creative Exploration, about 5 years ago to support the development of programs that combine a big background in many arts, in psychology, philosophy, and education. It's an extension of my life's work in the physical world, in which I did a lot of different forms of education and training in all kinds of venues, including school settings. And I was a Gestalt therapist with a long-time interest in humanistic and process psychology. Here in Second Life, I'm interested in moving in the direction of training people who work with people how to use the available tools symbolically to represent feelings, values, and content in various kinds of learning. So first I want to start with you and ask you to think about what are some typical challenges you face in your work. Now, some of you may be students, some may be teachers, some may be counselors, some may be a combination of different kinds of educators. And I'm asking you to think about what causes you anxiety or frustration or some kind of less than pleasant feeling, let's say, around a typical challenge that you face in your work. Also, what kinds of decisions do you have to make that may be difficult for you? And now, at your desk, wherever you are, I hope you have a paper and a pen, something to write with. And I want you to see if you can condense the statement of this typical problem or decision-making challenge you encounter to one sentence. I want to give you half a minute to do that, and then I want to collect examples of them in the chat bar. Okay, so when I give the signal, people can start writing these sentences in the local chat. Just one sentence, please. If someone already wrote lack of teamwork, oh yes. Okay, and as soon as you're ready now, just start writing your one sentence. Finding work. There are a lot of juicy things to work with here. Okay, great. There's a decision one, changing counseling schools or not. Over-responsible, feeling responsible for clients. Hey, boy, that's plenty. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so Morgane is, that's a balance problem, balancing work and life. Okay, great. So we might do something around that. Time management is a big one. In fact, I was going to give you examples of things that happen in here. Time management is certainly one of them. Typical problems, relationship challenges, values, confusions between the physical world and the virtual world. By the way, I don't call the other world the real world. I think that this is as real a part of my experience as that is. So there's a dysphoria for me around calling that real life and this second life. So I refer to the other world as the physical world. Another one had to do with technophobia, being able to get over my fear of breaking things or losing things or all kinds of things like that when I decided to come in here. Stylistic differences in the way we learn. There was a session this morning about that. And I can say that before I even knew about this session, I asked Deborah to create a space for me here that felt like it went with my learning style, which is interactive, which is often visual, intuitive, environmental, and so on. So I learn much better in a setup like this than I do in a lecture hall. And that's always been true for me. And some of you might also think about how you organize the space in your classrooms or wherever you're working for optimum learning to take place. And it may mean changing it from time to time to accommodate different learners. So now, if we can, we're going to use some of these things you put out, wonderful kinds of things to work with. in a demonstration that we're going to be doing. I'd like to introduce Ludo Merritt, my assistant in this session. I want to talk with Ludo for a few minutes. Let's have a little dialogue about the things that you read here and what caught your attention.
I've already pointed out that I share Counselor Morgane's problems, and I also share Gentle's problem because I also work with groups of people and have problems keeping some people from getting mad at other people. I suspect that Gentle has much more problem with that than I do, because her group is in VAI, which is virtual ability.
I was going to ask you if you could frame a process for us to work with here that might be of interest and value to the people who are assembled here. What I want you to pay attention to is how we work on a problem and how I have adapted to the technology that is available in this place in order to use it for learning rather than for creating, let's say, a building. I'm working on that too. But what I'm interested in is how can we use building tools metaphorically, symbolically, for learning processes and for solving problems, both for ourselves and with our students. So as I work with her, and she is going to choose the content to work on, you will be able to apply this approach to some of the kinds of problems that you put out. And later on, I will be interested in talking with you about what connections you make, okay? So, Ludo, frame a challenge that you would like to work on here.
Okay, I will frame two, and you can take your pick. There's one.
How can I learn from an online course that provides no documentation and simply records phone sessions when I am not an audio learner? The thing that we want to keep in mind here is that you need to have something to work on that you can actually model with objects. So the first one is slightly abstract. I think that you could still do it, but let me see what your second one is.
You've seen this one before.
Am I addicted to SL? SL is my only social and creative outlet, and I'm neglecting my health for it. How can I talk myself out of spending so much time? Maybe we ought to go with that one.
Usually Marly makes suggestions as to what aspects of it would be good to model. So I think I'll wait and see if she makes any suggestions to get me started.
All right, so would you please make a build of your addictive, what you call the addictive part of you. Let's see what that looks like. I don't know if those of you who are new here were taught how to create or pull a geometric form out of a create program, but basically it involves pointing to the ground and seeing the word create and then pulling a shape out from a bunch of geometric forms. That is the beginning of feeling closest to whatever you're going to symbolize. Now, Ludo is an experienced builder, but when I do this once a month in a coaching session in Second Life. I urge people to work at whatever level they're at. They can do very simple kinds of builds and just put colors on them and so on. So Ludo is now making a symbolic model of her, what she calls her addictive self. And while she's doing that, I'm going to ask her, I'm asking you, Ludo, to pay attention to the feelings in your body as you're doing this. So one thing that I do is I link up what's happening on the screen with what's happening physically to the person at home. And to watch for a click that says, ah, yes, that's it. In other words, your body is a barometer that helps you evaluate the visual experience. Now, if those of you who consider yourself addictive or that you work with addictive clients, My question, rhetorical question to you, we'll talk about it later, is if you were going to make a symbol of that addictive part, what would your symbol look like? And you might do it in a drawing. Here, it's possible to do it in a three-dimensional looking thing. And I'm looking into getting a pen that can draw directly on prims. I understand that that's now possible. I haven't found it yet. So I want you to look at this object with your cameras from all views. You just use the arrows to move around visually. Ludo, what is the feeling in your body as you look at your object?
A sort of a triumphant pride.
What does that voice say?
What does the object say?
Yes, that's the triumphant voice.
Triumphant pride says, Ludo, you're helping a lot of people by what you do in SL. You're great. Keep it up.
Okay, and does that feel like it's this object speaking?
Yes.
Okay, so now
this is a complicated object with a whole lot of color in it.
Yes, I am a complicated being.
I am complicated, and I'm doing a whole lot of different things in SL, and I can multi-process well, and I'm proud of myself.
All right, so now I suspect that there is a character that's a judge of this. Because when you're this, it sounds very positive. But when you put out the problem, you sounded like you had some judgment about being that way. So I want to see the judge.
Tell you what. I need an object, and then I need to say that it is sculpted. And I will tell you that I am not putting the judge here. I'm putting the victim here.
All right. Check with your body to see whether what you have put out corresponds with what you're feeling. If it's the right color, the right size, the right distance in relationship to the triumphant addict object. To report out any sensations that you're having while you're doing this.
I'm tense. I'm leaning forward. My throat's getting tight.
Okay. All right.
Black first, but now it's red. They're both equally appropriate. And this, the victim says, "Ouch! I hurt. You're spending so much time in SL that I can't sleep. And I've skipped meals. And my body hurts. Gotta do something about this."
About me. All right. I want you to notice.
About you multiplexing, multi-processing Ludo over there. We've got to do something about you.
In order to help me. In other words.
In order to help me, the victim. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now, I want you to go look closely at your addict object and see what the two of you have in common visually.
Well, for one thing, we both have some red.
Right. That's right.
We're
so there's some
same size.
Mm-hmm.
Both
okay.
shapes are complicated. One's nice and smooth and curved. The other one's all jagged, but both shapes are complicated.
All right. Complicated. They both share some red. They're both about the same size. So there's some basis now for, I'm going to ask you to do a little dialogue between the two objects that involves getting to yes. You know what I mean by getting to yes? A negotiation.
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. So, folks, everyone who's watching this, we're, of course, shortcutting this. If I had more time, we would take more time in the process. But I just want you to get an idea of how this works. All right, so go ahead, Ludo, and let's see what they can say to each other that might lead them to a negotiated process to yes.
Ludo Herding, I want to tell you that you're not going to be all that much better off if I were to quit SL entirely, because then what kind of a purpose would we have? What kind of a social outlet would we have? I would hurt like crazy if I didn't have people to talk to, if I couldn't help anybody. I mean, what would happen to you? Do you really think that you take care of your health any better? Or do you think that you just go to bed and not get up? It's like dieting. I can't stop eating. So it's very difficult to diet because I can't go whole turkey and completely stop eating.
Okay, so I want you to notice.
You can't stop SL.
I want you to notice, folks, the difference in how her voice sounds in each place.
Yep, I'm very good at immersing myself in a character.
Just notice the difference. That's right. But that is a clue. So when you're working this way in this kind of environment, you're depending both on what the person produces visually on the screen and how the person sounds. So that's just additional information. We're not going to analyze it now. I just want you to notice and observe. We'll talk later. Okay, go ahead, Ludo. Go a few more rounds so people can just get the sense of how this might move in some direction.
Ludo SL, what I need you to do is when you're so involved in helping somebody and I need a meal, tell them to wait and get offline and let me eat, please. Well, hey, you know, sometimes the people that I'm talking to are really upset, and I'm a half-trained life counselor, and I really hate to leave them in a situation like that. And if I leave in the middle of a build, like you've asked me to so often, I have trouble remembering where I left off, and sometimes SL eats the build. So, that's why it's so hard for me to stop in the middle. Yeah, true. And the way we feel, it makes it even harder for you to stop in the middle because you don't have very much control on account of I'm hurting so much, and you can feel that. But we still need to do something about it now, don't we? Well, hey, you know that I have told everybody that I need to get offline at 5 p.m., and you know that all my friends know that, and if they see me online past 5 p.m., they tell me to get the heck offline. So that's one thing. But taking regular meal breaks, that's more difficult, and I really need to do that. I also need to exercise, and I agree with you that I really do need to do that.
Okay, now, one thing I'm picking up is that there is a ghost voice here, and the ghost voice is the people that you're working with who you imagine would be somehow destroyed if you left in the middle of something. So I'd like you to put something out to represent the people who you feel pull on you to stay and not go eat, not go take care of yourself.
I'm going to make this quick.
Oh, that looks exactly like your victim one.
Exactly.
Ah.
The people that I don't like to leave feel the same way I feel like when I'm feeling like a victim. That's where my empathy comes from.
Uh-huh. So, how do you work with that?
Changing the color a little bit so that I know they're not me. I don't tend to stay up late nights worrying about them. But they sure look a lot like me.
All right, I want you to speak in the second rather than the third person. You're not me, etc. You no. Instead of they.
You're not me, and I'm talking from this gal now. You're not me, and I'm not going to stay up late at night worrying about you. But I really do hate to cut you off when you want to talk to me.
What does that part say? That part knows that you have a physical need that you're not taking care of in order to stay with them. What do you think that part says?
My clients know that. And what they generally say is, I really need to talk to you.
Okay, so now you have a pull on the part of your clients who want you to stay and a pull by your body that wants you to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't pay attention to that, then your red victim suffers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
And what's more,
So,
over here, I want to help this magenta person over here. I want to help. So there's a pull here too.
yes. Now, the way we would continue to work on this is that these three aspects of this issue, this challenge, need to communicate in depth with each other to find a solution to the conundrum, get clearer about what the problem actually is. Now, you may have a sense of this, Ludo. I've said to you before that when you perseverate, that is, when you state and restate a problem the same old way, you get the same old results.
This is a different way.
That's right. So today, we were going a little bit further, and I want to see if you can characterize the core issue that you're working on here. That's not a simple repetition of the problem as you usually put it out.
We brought the magenta spiky thing in.
Mm-hmm.
That's the main thing.
Those are your clients who don't want you to leave.
They're not really my clients. That object isn't really my clients. That object is my perception of them.
That's right. That's what your projection is about how they feel about your staying put and not taking care of yourself. So, what do you think the next step would be in this process?
Okay, in this process, what would be the next step? The next step in my process is to go talk to my life coach again.
Okay, so seeking support is certainly a good idea. But in the process of working on this with the visual symbology, what do you think would be the next thing? Okay.
You magenta thing. You are a perception. And I wanted to go to my clients and actually check that perception out. I want to tell them what the problem is and check that out. Because it's a perception.
All right. So that's what you are projecting onto your clients, that's what they would want, but you're not quite sure because you've never really talked it over with them in depth.
Well, I have, but I can be a lot more direct about it than I have been, I think.
Great. I think this is a good place to stop. I was also, by example, illustrating somebody put out the thing about taking too much responsibility for their clients, that I see Ludo or whoever I'm working with as the person who is creatively responsible for working on the issue. So I don't offer the solutions. I simply offer encouragement for what comes next, or I might put out something that I hear in the background that's not being represented or expressed. I think you probably pick that stuff up.
What's more, I wouldn't want you to worry about me, and I wouldn't want you to over-identify with me. I would resent it. I can handle my own problems, thank you very much.
Okay, now relate that to the work that you were just doing. Suppose that were the voice of your client. Okay?
Unfortunately, at least one of my clients doesn't know that he's that strong yet, but we'll get there.
Okay, but you see how the relationship between whoever I'm working with and me says also something about the problem that they're working on and how they view the problem. So we've just come a little bit of a full circle. I'd like to open it up now to the group of any questions or comments that you have about the process that you just saw. Let's see. It informs you. Learning tool, you can use the activity to really Some of us just aren't builders. I don't see things that way. So other similar processes not using 3D art. You could do role plays. You could do writing or poetry, all kinds of stuff. Now, I didn't have time to have you watch videos during this session. Send you to my website where there are 2 videos for you to watch, hopefully sometime today, so that you don't lose the learning from the session. The first one will be under the phrase Octagon for Creative Exploration. You'll click on a media button and then you'll see the videos there. And it was made at one of these conferences a year or 2 ago, and explains different kinds of programs that I do. In response to the person who just asked me, Gentle Heron, I describe a number of different kinds of tools and processes. And then the one above it is a demonstration of me doing a Gestalt coaching session with a friend and colleague who agreed to do the demonstration. And then if you're interested, there are a few audio interviews talking about my work combining creativity and arts processes and psychology. I also have a few PDF manuals under publications, which some of you might be interested in. Anyway, it's a fun website anyway. It's a creativity website, and there are a lot of different things on it. But I particularly would like you to watch the 2 videos. And now that you've seen this demonstration, the videos will make a lot of sense to you. The introduction to Gestalt, what I was doing with Ludo was a Gestalt dialogue. In Gestalt work, when you represent things that appear to be outside yourself, a way of incorporating them or assimilating them in your psyche is to become them and to give them a voice. And so that's what we were doing. And so part of the problem-solving process here is for all the voices to be represented. Now you notice, even though I have worked with Ludo dozens of times, I still have to remind her, and probably would have to remind all of you, to come out of the third person and go into the first or second person when you speak. Speak as I as the object, you as the object you're addressing, rather than it or they, because that immediately unhooks you from the direct and visceral experience, that being or that thing. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes. I'd like to leave time now for you to make any comments that you would like or ask any questions about this work, about the things that you saw here, whatever you'd like to comment on.
Jamie Firehawk wants to know how this is similar to or different from using a sand tray.
Because we're in a virtual world, so we're using the technology here on the screen, and a sand tray, in physical life, you actually handle objects. So that brings in another sense that has its own rewards. Each one of these techniques has pros and cons, like all theories and so on. So what I'm trying to develop here is how can I make optimum use of the technology here for learning, teaching, psychology, and so on. Reminding you of focusing therapy, yes. Yes. When I ask people to pay attention to what's going on in their body at home, that's very much a part of the process, and that is a focusing technique. Well, I certainly am influenced by NLP. In fact, my work partner, Skavjanik, and I do a coaching class the last Monday of every month, either at his venue, NLP House, or at mine, the Octagon, called Coaching with Creative Processes. If you're interested in this, you want to see more of it, you want to get more familiar with the process, I certainly suggest that you come to one of those. For those of you interested in this work, just join my group or my subscriber board, and you will get announcements about different programs. So I tried creating different avatars for different self parts. Sometimes I've done this with avatars as opposed to objects. Sometimes I feel that the objects give the people more freedom to express things that might be so-called too close to the bone, doing it with their own avatar. But I have done sessions in which I've had people distort their avatars, try to find out what it's like being a very thin, a very fat, a very tall, a very short avatar, or dressing in ways that are completely different from the ways that you ordinarily choose to dress. And that's also a really interesting discovery exercise. Also, particularly for people who are interested in diversity issues, being a different race and ethnicity is a very revealing way to experiment with your avatars. Nude, yes. Yes, well, we know about mirror neurons, that is, the brain doesn't make any real distinction between our actual outside experience and what we're experiencing on the screen. So when you're nude in Second Life, it's as though you were publicly nude in your physical life, but it's a great way to deal with the feelings about it. Yes, you get different reactions, and also you know people switch genders and experiment with being the other gender. I had a client actually quite a healthy organizational client in regular life that I met with mostly on the phone, who decided to come into Second Life as a woman because he wanted to see, even though he was not transgendered, although that is a specialty of mine, I work a lot with transgendered people, but he wanted to see what it was like to go around here as a woman and how people would treat him and how that would be different from his male experience. And it was very revealing. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. You have my name in here, Marly Milena. If you want to talk to me in IM or come visit the Octagon, I'd be happy to meet with you.